Good evening. This is Eric Hackley. We're now in Detroit, Michigan, trying to find a parking spot. We're getting ready to go into the Detroit Public Library to do an interview with Barbara Martin, who's the head of the Hackley Collection. I'm not sure what her title is, but I know that she's been working there for quite a few years. We came to Detroit last night. What was that? What was last night? Tuesday night, Wednesday night, to the 62nd annual concert, and we just want to find out, what is behind this, these Hackleys here, and what they're doing with this Hackley Collection, and what the whole thing is about. So we're just driving by the library right now, and their library is magnificent. But as soon as Fort Wayne's library is completed, I think that ours will be equally magnificent. Detroit is I don't know, it's an enjoyable place to visit, especially when you look down the street here and see all those monstrous tall buildings down there. But I understand that you had a question for me.
How do you feel about the information you've learned this weekend about the Hackley, even in addition to what you already have known?
Well, I found out one thing that's interesting is when you think that you've done some research on your own, and quite obviously the people here at the Hackley Collection, they gave me the they along with people here in Fort Wayne too, gave me the information to start my research, and then I found how to take off on my own and learn more. And I don't know, she people who read about history and understand history, they can always tell you new and enlightening things, because as you're learning on your own and finding out things on your own, they don't stop learning also, and they find new things out, and before you know it, you find yourself engaged in a 2-hour conversation. And because we had planned on being back in Fort Wayne right now, and we're just now leaving Detroit, but I gotta apologize to the people who went with me that I had no intention of tying up this much time, but time flies when you're comparing notes, and it gets inspiring, and then it just kind of takes off on its own. So again, we had a good time here, and but one thing I do want to mention, we had a chance to go by the mayor's office at their, I don't know if if they're a city county type building, I don't know what it's called, and we hope to come back here soon and get him on the show. Young man, we're going to find out more about him, how he has dealt with the Willie Lynch syndrome, and just I found out that the one way that we can really inspire and make our Fort Wayne black community grow is by leaving the Fort Wayne community and going to other cities and talking with some of their black leaders and seeing how they overcame obstacles, because the one thing that unites all blacks, in addition to Black History Month, is the fact of our common history of slavery and how we overcame that, and what we did to rise above things. And talking with the mayor of Detroit will be a certainly interesting conversation, and hopefully he'll agree to come on Hackonomics. So again, just stay tuned. We're going to be going inside here shortly and talking with people in the library about the Hackley Collection. Talking with Barbara Martin, and Barbara, a lot of people would never believe where I am. Where exactly? Okay, we're in Detroit, Michigan, but where are we? What is this room called?
This is called the reading room of the E.Azalia Hackley Collection.
Tell me a little bit about this Hackley Collection. How did it get started, and what is it about?
The Hackley Collection is an archive that documents the contributions of blacks to the performing arts. It was started in 1943 by the Detroit Musicians Association, which is a branch of the National Association of Negro Musicians. They gave a small collection of material to the Detroit Public Library to create this collection that would pay tribute and preserve the work of the black performing artist.
So now, how did the name Hackley become involved?
Oh, it was the suggestion of the then president of the Detroit Musicians Association that the collection be named after Madam E.Azalia Hackley, because of her work as a musician, as an educator, as a promoter of the race, music, and musicians.
You know, I've read just a little bit about her. How did she I mean, was she a wealthy woman to be able to travel around the country to raise money?
Not at all. She was not wealthy, but she uh, used her efforts and all of her resources. She did have a school at one time, and she was educated at the University of Denver, and what we believe to be one of the first, if not the first, black to graduate from their School of Music. But she had a love for black music, particularly the spiritual, and she went around the country having fundraisers, and the fundraisers would be in the form of a concert, and she'd come in, she'd teach the people spiritual arrangements, and then after the rehearsals they would perform these arrangements, and she would also perform herself. And her idea was to get the colored population to really re-embrace folk music, or the music of their heritage. And this is known by many musicians in the black community. And so Madam Hackley's name is known not only here in Detroit, but all over the country, really. At one time, she was called the music teacher for the race. And she would use some of the funds not only to support herself and the work she was doing, but she'd raise money to help the careers of struggling black musicians. She sent several musicians to Europe to study from monies raised through just this way.
You know, all right, now, she was born in 1867. How did she become an accomplished musician? I mean, because slavery was barely over with by then.
Right, exactly. Well, her mother was also a musician. Her mother was from Detroit, and that's our real connection here. Her mother was from the Beard family here in Detroit, and she married a Mr. Smith. And Smith was from Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And so they moved to Murfreesboro, and racism and discrimination really prohibited her mother from earning any kind of living teaching in music. And so she, and also the marriage didn't last. And she and the two girls, Marietta, Emma's younger sister, came back to Detroit when Madam Hackley was 6 years old. So I believe it was the work and the tenacity of her mother and the family supporting her to do this. And she didn't, if I have the sequence of events right, I believe she went to school after she married Edwin Hackley, went to college.
And you know, as I've been going to the internet and going through books through our library, we have a great library too in Fort Wayne. One of the things I found that kind of surprised me was Azalia's mother. I think I read where she was sent to music school also by her slave, or somebody was a slave in there someplace, and the slave owner sent her to school, and they paid for her education. I read that someplace, and then that I found that interesting because I didn't know that slave owners did that. You know, encouraged some of their slaves to pursue music education, because we're talking about it at a time when, you know, everybody wasn't free yet. Some were.
Right.
And that just struck me as being interesting. Okay, now what happened here last night? Okay, every year you have, for how many years have you been having concerts in Detroit?
This was our 62nd annual Azalia Hackley concert.
Now, you have some posters here on the floor, on a table here. Hold this one here up, please. Now, tell me about this poster here.
Well, this poster represents our theme for this year's concert. We called it Master Keys, a tribute to Detroit jazz. And we wanted to call the names out like we do in traditional in African ancestry, call out the names of the important ancestors that have gone on. And we have three among many very great jazz musicians that died over the last 5 years. And they are Tommy Flanagan, who had an international career, and more locally, Harold McKinney and Teddy Harris Jr. And so we wanted to pay tribute to them and celebrate Detroit jazz, and this was the theme of last night's concert.
You know, I noticed last night that the place was pretty well packed. Do you always get a packed house?
I'd say within the last 5 years, yes, we have. It's grown over the years the community sort of embraces it. It's like the signature event for the library in Black History Month.
You know, what have you done here? I mean, a lot of cities, when they have Black History Month events, you know, a lot of times they don't get the big turnout. You know, what have you done here? I mean, have you put forth an educational campaign to enlighten the people here in Detroit, or what's been done over the years to cultivate this market here to make them literate in what you're doing?
Well, I think it is a progressional kind of thing, but every Black History Month, there's always so many things going on in the city of Detroit that I've come to calling, and admittedly I'm biased, I've become to call Detroit the Mecca for Black culture, because not because we're doing anything different than any other urban city, but I think we just have so much of it, and it's so diverse. And so we start the Black History Month off with a wonderful, either a book lecture of an author. And I think our community has just come to know the library is the place for this kind of thing. And it's happening all over the city, but because the library is public, and many of our events, last night's event, there was an admission charge, but that's not the norm. Most of our events are free to the public.
And, you know, some folks in Fort Wayne who have told about this event were surprised that an event like this would be held in the library.
I think it is unusual, but not unusual for us, because 62 years, I mean, that's pretty constant. I think in that time there might have been 2 years where there wasn't a concert held. And before the archive was officially created, the library already had a relationship with the Detroit Musicians Association, and they were holding concerts here anyway, more informally.
Okay, now, all right, it's called the Hackley Collection. What does the collection consist of?
We collect books, records, and now multimedia, CDs, DVDs. We have original music manuscripts that people have given us over the years. We have a wonderful collection of music by Ulysses Kay, a wonderful Black composer. We have Philippa Shire's Manhattan Nocturne in her own writing. When she wrote this at 13 because she was away from New York City and she was homesick. Philippa Shire was a young prodigy on the piano, Black woman. So we have printed music, let's see, we said records, sheet music, books, and it's not only on music. It's on all genres of the performing arts. So the books cover all of the subjects: music, dance, theater, film,